systems in Saskatchewan for Saskatchewan conditions. Google North home windows. Let's start with the Riders right there, as you said.
Yeah,
I think they're looking great.
Well, this is a great matchup because I know Hamilton's 0-2, but they deserve better. They're 2 games. They had leads going into the third. They lost those leads. They lost games they know they could have won, and I think Bo Levi Mitchell has played outstanding. I think he's back. I know everyone is kind of reluctant to say that until he starts winning again, but I'm just talking about him physically, his recognition, his processing speed. I talked to Milanovic, who's kind of a quarterback expert in a lot of ways, his head coach. He feels like he's the same. And then you take a look at Trevor, and Trevor's leading the league after 2 weeks. So we're going to tonight see the best 2 quarterbacks in the league. And Vernon Adams is in that discussion, but these are the number 1 and 2 quarterbacks in the stats. And one quarterback's led his team to a 2-0 start.
Indeed, and the Riders have got it done largely on the strength of Trevor Harris's right arm. He's leading the league in passing coming into week 2, leading the league in passing touchdowns. What stood out to you about him and this receiving group getting off to such a fast start? Because the old cliche, usually it's the defense that has the edge early in the season.
Yeah, it's a good question because I asked Rick Campbell, and when you talk to the coaches going into the week of, whatever game you're doing, and I talked to Rick, I talked to Coach Mace here, and they're all saying the same thing, that they believe that the offenses are ahead because of the continuity at the quarterback position, that guys are back with their same coordinators. In this case here, because Coach Mueller is new, but it's the same receiving core as you mentioned, basically, with Schaefer Baker and Bain and Emelis. So, and Emelis hasn't had his breakout game yet, so maybe it's his turn tonight. But yeah, there's 2 things I'm really enjoying about the start to this season. The offenses look great. The quarterback play has been outstanding. We're talking about efficiency rating right through the roof, and they're completing around 70% of their passes across the board. Touchdown-interception ratios are excellent. And a lot of the leading receivers, 3 out of the top 10, are Canadian. And, this idea that the ratio can be a burden is just, if you're a coach that thinks that way, you're not going to win games in this league. And because the Canadian talent is killing it. They're doing great.
You touched on it there, and I was going to go elsewhere, but let's talk about it right here and now because I'm sick of hearing about that, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
When you give Canadians opportunities, sorry, Wes, you were great, and I didn't play in the CFL, but it's proven now. When you give Canadians, Glenn, opportunities to play the skill positions, have they not shown they can play?
Yeah.
Brady Oliveira, Kean Schaefer-Baker, these guys could easily play in the NFL. I don't care what anybody else says, but we still have this issue with the Canadian quarterbacks. Are the Elks right now, for example, better off with McLeod Bevel-Thompson at quarterback? That's a whole debate in of itself. But the Canadians, I think, are at an all-time high. There's never been more Canadians in the NFL. There's never been more Canadians playing in the NCAA. There's never been more high-quality Canadians coming out of U Sports. There's never been more Canadians coming out of the Canadian Junior Football League and getting opportunities in the CFL. So I'm so happy that you said that.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. I mean, you look at the last few years, a Canadian has been the leading rusher in the league, whether it be Brady Oliveira or before that Andrew Harris. Now we have receivers that are in the top 10. We've had the best rush end. Last year we had the best. The Canadian was the best rush end. And it's not us against them. I mean, you got to play together. And it's
well said.
And in fact, it's a great example of what's possible when you look at a football locker room in Canada with the Americans and Wes. I don't want to get political, but you put Republicans and Democrats in the same room, you might be in trouble now. But we could put Americans and Canadians in the same room and all be there thinking in the same way for a similar goal. So, when you look at the skilled positions, the leaders are becoming Canadians, and because they're getting more opportunities. And the reason it took this long, I believe, is that American coaches had a built-in bias. If you played in Alabama, if you played in Ohio, if you played in the big schools down south, you were automatically better. And in some cases, and I'm going to put myself in this category, but in some cases like Elgard and Fairholm and other guys, it takes a year because they're indoctrinated into football when our guys are playing hockey at 8 or 9 or 10 years old. And then when they get to high school, they're starting here. But now that training and everything is just, blown it up. So, Yeah, I'm always waving the Canadian flag. I'm cheering for the Oilers. So, and I don't like the Oilers. So I'm cheering for them because it's a Canadian team. But you know what? Again, I think the synergy of the U.S. Canadian. Good thing we didn't get rid of it, because there was times in the last 10 years that there was a push from even the league office.
Yes, sir.
To lessen it or limit it or even get rid of it, and thank goodness we didn't do that.
A lot of people around Rider Nation are happy to see the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 0-3. You called that game. BC beats them at their home stadium. That's their second loss at home already this season. Are they in trouble?
Yeah, well, they've got a ways to go. I mean, their issues are twofold. The two places on the field, the two position groups on the field that you have to be playing together are offensive line and DBs. Those guys, I always kind of make the analogy that if you took a chain link and there was 5 chain links in the defensive backfield, if you break one and 3 go this way and 2 go this way, that gap is what's going to be exploited. Same with the offensive line. There's a link, 5 chains together. They got to move together. And the changes for Winnipeg there have been an issue. Zach's not getting as much time as he used to. The run game isn't quite as powerful as it used to be. Brady Oliveira. The other side of it is those guys didn't play in the preseason. Brady Oliveira, Zach Collaros, some of the receivers, they didn't play in the preseason, and so the first 2 games were kind of trying to get their feet wet, and we're seeing it now. Now, after 3 weeks, they've got injuries. Lawler's out. Looks like Schoen's going to be out. Oliveira's not 100%. Might be a chance to kind of start to get a little bit of a cushion in the West, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm not allowed to cheer. I'm just saying. I'm not allowed to cheer. Everyone's giving me a dirty look now when I say that. What do you mean you're not allowed to cheer? Come on, you're in a room full of green jerseys.
Well done staying unbiased. There have been some power rankings out there that had the Bombers 9th, even going into that game. I imagine that's where a lot of the pundits across the league would have them coming out of week 3. Can they bounce back from this, or has the roster gotten to a point where at some positions maybe it is a little bit old now?
Well, I think there's some truth to that, no question. I mean, Stanley Bryant's not a young man at left tackle, and they lost their right tackle. He's here. So, I think there is something to be said about their age collectively. However, if you took the 2 teams that are struggling at 0-3, Edmonton and Winnipeg, I think Winnipeg can turn it around more likely than Edmonton can. Edmonton's been close, don't get me wrong, and McLeod Bethel-Thompson is not the reason, but leaving Trey Ford on the bench, to me, I don't know how he's not doing something. He's not contributing in some way. He's just too dynamic of an athlete to have him sitting on the bench all game. Having said that, I could see Winnipeg figuring it out even before Edmonton can. Just because of their coaching staff, their culture, and they made 2 coaching changes that no one's talking about. Mike Miller takes over as the special teams guy, and Jordan Younger is their DC now. Richie Hall was that guy for a long time, and fans here know Richie Hall well. So that's the transition too.
You mentioned Edmonton there, so real quick, I'll get you hit on this. Chris Jones 0-3.
Yeah.
The bye week is coming soon. Could there be a coaching change there? A lot of Rider Nations obviously following what Chris Jones does, maybe hoping for some negative things to happen to him after the way he left Riderville.
Yeah, I hate this discussion. Is a difficult one because it makes it sound like we're trying to fire somebody, and we're not going to fire any coach from here. Our role in this whole thing is not to fire a head coach. Having said that, if you take the collective last 2 years and then the start to this season, and you're looking at 0-4 after being 4-win team for 2 years in a row with the same staff, I don't know how they can't start talking about a change. I mean, put yourself in the GM spot. You have to be considering it, I would think.
I mean, Chris Jones is the GM, but you would think Will Usher,
the president
might be
and the board. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
You look at the schedule. They play at BC next week on the Thursday, so another road game, and then it's the bye week. You would think it would be a natural change, and also add this context to it, that there's the sale in the background.
Yep.
And if it's somebody taking over the team, I'm not like you trying to get somebody fired, but maybe that's somebody saying, hey, can you deal with Chris Jones? Get him out of the way so we can start completely fresh with this organization and hopefully start to get Commonwealth, even a little bit full again.
I don't know if they go 0-4 against the Lions at home, the Lions playing at home, and the way Vernon's playing right now, they're going to be favored. Let's put it that way, in a big way. I just think that discussion is going to have to start. I mean, can they go to Labor Day at 0-8 again or 0-7? And the ownership is a very good point. That is their way to say, look, we're going to start fresh, and talk to the fan base and say we're cleaning house, we're starting fresh. Again, we're not firing anybody, but Chris Jones knows how this works.
Yeah, not his first rodeo, as they say.
Yeah.
Glenn, thanks so much for joining us live on video.
You got it, guys.
We're going to be doing it all season long. When you're in here, I think you have 7 of the Rider home games on the season schedule.
Yes, sir.
So we'll keep it rolling.
I request them. Even though I have to stay neutral.
Love it. Thanks for joining us, Glenn.
Thanks, guys.
This is Saskatchewan Rough Rider football on the home of Rider Nation, the 620 CKRM Cooperators Rough Rider Radio Network.